You know how a computer gets bogged down with corrupted files over time? Well, today's deep dive tackles a dense new scientific paper that asks, what if human aging works exactly the same way?
Right, like a software glitch.
Exactly. And we are looking at a blueprint for actual gene-based age reversal to see if we finally have the tools to just hit factory reset.
It is a really fascinating way to look at it because the researchers, they frame aging not as just this inevitable one-way decay, but as biological weathering.
Biological weathering, like rust on a car.
Yeah, precisely like rust. They track this weathering, specifically looking at instability and how our DNA is regulated across 31,744 different genomic sites. So the code basically gets messy and the system loses its efficiency over time.
Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive. The paper outlines a 4-phase therapeutic regimen to clear out that mess. Okay, so let's unpack this. Does this mean we can actually restore the original code?
Yes, essentially. The researchers mapped out a playbook to reset the system, and they do this by targeting exactly 106 specific multi-omic aging genes.
Wow, just 106.
Yeah, but to execute a factory reset, well, you first need to know what the factory settings actually are.
Right, you need a benchmark for what youthful even looks like.
Exactly. The primary benchmark they use is a gene called ELOVL2. The goal is to strip away the weathering through a process called demethylation until that gene sits at roughly 44%.
Because that is the baseline.
Yeah, that happens to be the exact level found in healthy 20-year-olds. But, before you can make that edit, you have to prep the body to accept the changes. So phase 1 uses GLP-1 agonists to create what they call a systemic metabolic shield.
Wait, hold on. GLP, like the weight loss drugs everyone is talking about?
Yes, exactly the same ones.
Because I saw the paper claim this lowers the risk of ovarian cancer by 47%.
Yeah.
But you have to connect the dots for me there. How does a metabolic drug physically protect our epigenetics from cancer?
I know it sounds a bit random, but it comes down to an enzymatic pathway known as the AMPK-TET2 phosphoswitch.
Okay, that is a mouthful.
Right. Well, as we age, chronic inflammation and metabolic stress degrade an enzyme called TET2. Think of TT2 as a guardian that normally protects our genes from dangerous mutations.
Oh, I see.
So GLP-1 drugs actually stabilize that AMPK pathway, which in turn keeps TT2 alive and active. It dampens the inflammatory noise and restores our natural cellular defenses.
Oh, wow. So that shields the body so the actual gene editing can happen safely?
Exactly.
Okay, so the GLP-1 shield is up, but the DNA is still tightly coiled up and hidden inside our cells. The paper mentions using HDAC2 inhibitors to basically unschool it. But once the DNA is exposed, how do we actually reach those 106 aging genes to edit them without causing massive damage?
That is where phase 3 comes in. It is called the TIGR-Tas platform. It is an RNA-guided editing tool, but it is about a quarter of the size of CRISPR.
It is tiny.
Very tiny. And more importantly, it is PAM-independent.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning it does not require a specific genetic keyhole to latch onto, so it can access tightly packed parts of the genome that CRISPR is entirely locked out of.
Let me make sure I'm visualizing this right, because CRISPR is famous for acting like a pair of genetic scissors, cutting and splicing the actual DNA string. But TIGR-Tas sounds more like a microscopic eraser.
That is a great analogy, actually. It uses a specific fusion protein, TET2, to gently scrub the accumulated epigenetic grime off those 106 genes.
So no cutting involved.
None at all. It is a true hardware reset that leaves the underlying DNA sequence completely uncut and intact.
But I mean, the human body has trillions of cells.
Yeah.
Editing every single one is physically impossible. How does erasing the grime on a tiny fraction of cells rejuvenate the whole organism?
That puzzle is solved in phase 4, which relies on a mechanism beautifully named telomere rivers.
Telomere rivers, I like that.
Right. The researchers take a specific type of white blood cell, CD4 plus T cells, outside the body and treat them with compounds called DOS disruptors. This treatment fixes the cell's energy production, specifically restoring their fatty acid oxidation.
So we're basically giving these immune cells their youthful metabolism back.
Yes.
But how does that help the rest of the body?
Because once they have that youthful energy, you infuse them back into the patient, and they start releasing massive networks of telomeric material. Because their internal engines are fixed, they act as tiny factories, literally pumping rivers of youth-promoting factors to distant organs.
Wait, so what does this all mean? We don't have to fix every cell at once. We just drop in a few highly energized cells and let them do the heavy lifting.
That is the competitive youth model in a nutshell. The math shows that reinfusing just 5,000 of these rejuvenated cells is enough to systemically spread youth.
Just 5,000.
Yeah, they simply outcompete the older, sluggish cells. When they tested this specific river mechanism in mice, it extended their median lifespan by 17 months.
Which is huge for a mouse. And this brings us to why this matters to you listening right now. This research completely shifts how we view aging. It is no longer an inevitable, irreversible decline.
Right. It is a measurable, treatable condition. One that can actually be tracked in real time by looking at just 3 tiny chemical markers called CpG sites on that ELOVL2 gene.
Exactly. It implies the program of youth is a fundamental, manageable mechanism. And here's a thought to leave you with today. Since these telomere river pathways are conserved across all biology, they even exist in plants.
Which is incredible.
It is. Could we one day engineer universal super rejuvenator cell lines? Just imagine going into the clinic once a decade, getting a quick injection of these cells like an oil change, hitting that factory reset and halting aging entirely.